Maya and Joanne and everyone who's organised this wonderful event and invited me here to speak to you. I'm a junior doctor working in London, and I'm here today to just talk about my own personal experience of escaping the threat of forced marriage in 1996 with my sisters. But just going to go back to 2 years ago first and how it all started in terms of talking about my experience. I was watching a documentary on forced marriage one night, and I was also just sort of playing with my phone on Twitter, and so got into the program and I looked up the hashtag forced marriage, and there was a discussion about it on Twitter. And also I was so moved by the discussion on Twitter and the documentary that for the first time I said something. I sort of tweeted my own experience with the police and how unfortunately it wasn't a positive one. And it was picked up by IKWRO, the Iranian Kurdish Women's Organization. They just picked up the tweet and they contacted me through Twitter and said, do you want to come and talk to us about what happened? And sort of maybe we could use that as sort of a learning thing. And also it led to me meeting up with this wonderful organization, which I think is wonderful, and doing a bit more of these talks. So initially just to journalists, and I have sort of started on this journey, which is kind of healing, but also it's made me realize that it wasn't just the police that let us down. Probably the school let us down, the social services did, and also my own counsellor, who I really trusted and who was really wonderful, but also she could have helped. Well, I'll talk about all of that. But through IKWRO, I've also talked to done a similar talk with the Forced Marriage Commission, which advised the government for the illegalisation of forced marriage, and helped sort of be a survivor's voice when they published their study on looking at how the police in the UK deals with forced marriage, and also now their campaign with getting forced marriage, honour-based violence and FGM in sort of being taught in schools, which I find really important. So back to 1996 when we were we escaped, or maybe actually back to the beginning. I was born in Iran, and my parents were quite liberal. My dad actually made me think that I could do anything I wanted. I could be anyone who I wanted, and I'm really grateful actually for that initial sort of feeling, because that made me inspire to be so much more than what later on I was told that I'm going to be. My family had to escape Iran because of my dad's political activities when I was 12, and around the same time we lived in Cyprus for a bit. My mum was diagnosed with leukemia, and she was told she had to come. It was best she came to Britain for treatment. So she went to London for treatment, and later on, when it became clear that she wasn't going to survive, we joined her in London, and unfortunately she passed away. Within a year, my dad remarried. My stepmom was also a lady who had just left Iran, and she herself had been a victim of forced marriage when she was 13. She had a very traditional outlook on life and what was expected of women, and so it really changed my dad's outlook. Everything changed from the beginning. We weren't allowed to go anywhere but school. We weren't allowed to have she wanted to know who we were friends with. We weren't allowed to meet them outside school. If we were a little bit late from school, she would come driving along the road to see who we were with. We weren't allowed to have pocket money. We weren't allowed to have my Saturday job anymore, because what would people say, you know, girls working. As I said, we weren't allowed to stay over at friends. We weren't allowed to choose what we wanted to wear. It just, any indication that something that we wanted to wear was slightly fashionable was, that's westernized. Why are you trying to be like those Western girls? And it immediately became about protecting us from becoming westernized, and protecting the honor of the family, because we were unmarried girls who she would have to find husbands for, and so it was important that the honor of the family was kept. I read books. My stepmom told my dad I was reading romance novels, and he became devastated by the fact. So I wasn't, even reading books was problematic. She had a baby with my dad, and also she brought her two youngest sons from Iran. She had an older daughter, but she stayed in Iran. So her 4-year-old and 6-year-old came with us, and we were looking after the baby and her two sons, and it was all about training to become housewives. It was really demeaning. Everything was about becoming a housewife. When you're a housewife, you're going to do this. When you're a housewife, you're going to cook this way. So even the chores were becoming such a demeaning thing, because it was all about your place as a girl. So we felt like sort of slaves and prisoners. And so everything was very controlled, and she did talk about when I will choose your husband. And so that made us feel, I used to walk around with this feeling, sick feeling in my stomach, that knowing that this was going to come. Somehow, deep inside, I knew it wasn't going to come. I wasn't going to let it, but it was going to come. The school could have picked it up. I went from being sort of A-star student to just really dropping, because also emotionally it was draining, but I didn't have time. A few times there was a threat of violence. My dad would blow up, and that was just because she had come home, and my sisters were watching TV, and I was upstairs studying. And how dare girls sit idle when there's work in the house and when there's dishes? And so I would study when she went to bed at night. And this whole sort of... The school did actually try. They said, a few times they took me and said, look, something's happening. What is it? And one of my most trusted teachers, I knew, I had told her, and we talked about how things had changed, and she talked to my head of year, and she said, fine, we're going to deal with this. We're going to bring them in, we're going to have a family meeting. And this happened a few times, and I'll be like, no, it's okay. I went home, I talked to them, and it was okay, because I was terrified. My dad had been very violent towards my mum. We knew what he was capable of. Few times things did get violent if she hadn't got her way. He did put his hand on his heart every time things got a bit, my chest, my heart, called the ambulance. We went through those stuff. And also he would remind us what could happen in Iran. Although my parents had moved away to Tehran, and we lived in Tehran, my extended family were very strict. The girls in my extended family weren't allowed to go to school after 14. They were all married off by 14, which is something my mum used to try and fight. So my dad would remind us that this is, your uncles, and we had from birth, from young age, been assigned people that we would marry in our family, in the extended family. So he would remind us that I could send you back to Iran, that she wants me to send you back to Iran. So there was a choice of forced marriage in London, which was probably better than forced marriage in Iran. So we were terrified of being sent back to Iran, and that was something that stopped us, sort of made us conform. I was a bit more of a conformist. I would try and keep things peaceful at home, just sort of, study when I could and just try and sort of keep them pleased. Whereas my sister my 16-year-old sister was a little bit, my middle sister, she was a little bit more, she wanted to listen to music, and that was awful. Like, listening to music in her room was just like, you weren't allowed to do that. She would rip her jeans because people in her school, everybody was wearing ripped jeans, and oh my God, that was a big issue, and she was becoming westernized, and we had to stop that. So it all culminated in trying to get her, I think, married off first, because she was more of a threat. As I said, I was also seeing a counsellor because when my mom had passed away, we'd been offered some counselling. My sisters decided not to take it up. I took it up, and I found her really helpful. She was very inspiring, and she did help me a lot with sort of getting over the grief of my mum. But she would also I met her every 2 weeks, and that was also problematic because my stepmom didn't like us talking about the things that were going on at home to outside. Again, that was getting Western people involved, sorry, her words. And also, so I became under pressure to stop that. But also I think at the end it was a bit of a relief, because I would meet her every 2 weeks and she would set goals for me. And she would say, look, you need to be more assertive. You need to sit down and, you need to say, Dad, tonight we're going to have a family meeting. Just sit after dinner and say, look, this is not right. I want this. I should have friends. I should be able to meet my friends. I should be able to have pocket money, or I should be able to have my Saturday job if I want to. And I would, for 2 weeks that I was going to meet her, I would just have nightmares about this because I couldn't do it. And I still, very recently, it was actually just a few weeks ago, I was talking to someone from IKWRO, and I realized, oh my God, I have grown up, all these years, I have been thinking I am not assertive, that I can't assert myself because of those feelings, those weeks when I would go back and have to sort of feel that I'd failed my counsellor, that I didn't assert myself, that she didn't realise that actually the threat of being sent back to Iran to be married off, or the threat of the violence, was real. And I was the best person to judge that. So, yes. So anyway, eventually, it culminated in my sister finding out that my stepmom was arranging for her to be married to a 40-year-old man. She overheard this, and I say arranged, but we wouldn't have wanted to get married. My stepmom had a friend who had recently, for a few weeks, had stopped talking. They'd stopped talking to each other. But this lady was learning English in our school, in a class for adults. And so we used to bump into her sometimes, and she would say hello. And my sister had bumped into her, and after overhearing this, I don't know, it was a sort of the week, there was kind of this feeling of disbelief, or was it really happening? What did you hear? But so she bumped into this lady, and the lady said, yes, no, it's true. There was a family that we'd recently met, and we had been taken to see this family several times, and we'd been told to dress up. And so the family had chosen my sister. for this 40-year-old guy, and she said, don't, if you ever need anything, I can help you. You don't have to, feel like you're alone, which was an amazing feeling to have someone to say from the community, that she was on our side. But I don't know why, but we thought the police could help. So one day we were very rarely left alone. One day she went out with my dad, and my dad was trying to set up a charity, so he would go out and drive around and meet a lot of Iranian people, and she would go with him. And this one day after I had just finished my A-level exam, so I was 18. And my sister had just turned 16 recently. So my dad took, they took the baby it was really, and they went out. So we thought, this is our chance. And it was all within the same week, it was all happening. We called the police for some advice, and I don't know, I had all my hopes on them, and the lady said, we can't really, I don't know what you're expecting to do, we can't help, but we'll send some officers, we'll send an officer to come and talk to you. And they sent a male officer and a female officer, and they came and sat to see what's going on. And they said, look, there is no sign of violence. There's no sign of in the house. There's no sign of violence in the house. You guys don't have any bruises. What do you want us to do? What can we do? And I was like, but this marriage, we don't want it. And the police guy looked at me and said, it's your culture. Where do you go from that? So they said they were leaving, and as they were leaving, my sister was 11. She was still at the last year of primary school, and my two stepbrothers were in the primary school as well. The primary school was right opposite the house, and they were in a lunch break. And as the policeman and woman were coming out of the house, the three of them were just standing there on the faces with looking at, and we hadn't we hadn't thought of that, but then suddenly me and my sister thought, oh, now how are we going to explain this? Because they're going to come home and say after school, oh, there was police in the house. And we thought, okay, well, that was, in a way, that made the decision for us. We just took a few bits of clothes, and we went around and hid on the other side of the school, waited till 3 o'clock when my sister finished school, and I went into her classroom, and I had to lie to her. I had to say, Dad's sending us to Iran today. We have to go because she wouldn't come. And so we just ran across, and for some bizarre reason, my dad had decided to come home at that time and pick up the boys, and he was actually in the school. So I took care, and we ran. There was some. Anyway, so we left, and we phoned the lady. We were really lucky because the lady was a couple, and we phoned them and said, we've run away, can we stay with you? And so she said yes. And the very next day I thought, I phoned the social services because I didn't want to feel that I'd kidnapped my younger sister. So we phoned the social services and said, this is what happened, we're not going back home, and I'm not letting my 11-year-old go back home, but I need your help. They said, come and meet us, and they were like, fine, this is fine, we're going to sort this out, we're going to have a family meeting, we're going to mediate, everybody has to sit, and it terrified us, absolutely terrified us. She was a really scary lady, my stepmom, but also my dad. So my saving grace was that my stepmom was so upset about this shame that we'd brought to the family by running away and by getting another Iranian family involved and trying now to get the social services involved. She's like, she wasn't going to be told by Western social services how to bring up kids, and so she was like, no. I'm not setting eyes on them again, which was fine by us, because then we had the meetings with my dad. I think it also freed my dad, because she was saying, I'm not seeing them again, they're not setting in foot in this house again, you're not allowed to see them ever again. So it kind of freed him up to... And on the other side, I was saying, I'm going to take you to court, I'm going to do whatever. And I think he really overestimated how much the social services were willing to help us. And he overestimated what the police were actually doing, which was nothing as far as I'm concerned. So he kind of thought that, you know, we've got the social services on our side and stuff. But in the end, everybody agreed that my sister could stay with me. The 16-year-old wasn't an issue, because legally at that time it wasn't an issue. But so we said we're going to live together and I was going to look after them. But it was still with the condition for the social services, as far as they were concerned, that we were going to stay with this couple, and initially, and my dad would always have contact and supervise, and that was the condition. So then me, my 16-year-old, got 2 jobs. We stayed with the lady for a little while. It wasn't an ideal situation. It made us quite vulnerable at that time, and then where do you go? Because you can't go to your dad and say there are issues where we're living now with these people, because you were the one who ran away, and you had to go to social services. So, which is why I think it's so wonderful that IKWRO have now got a shelter for Middle Eastern women that sort of knows the issues. So, yeah, it wasn't easy from then on. I usually stop at this point, but it was really difficult. My sister, I didn't get into I wanted to do medicine. I didn't get into medicine because I hadn't got the grades. But I went in to do another course, and then I went to do medicine as a graduate student later. But I had 2 jobs. I worked as a receptionist during the week, and I worked in the weekend. I worked in a market stall, and my sister, a 16-year-old, bless her, she used to work at nights, babysit at nights, and at the weekends work as a sales assistant. And we got our own little flat, and it wasn't easy, because also it put me in a position where I was suddenly my sister's grown-up person rather than their sister, and it made me it kind of brought its own problems, and it made me distant from them, which I didn't want. For example, my 16-year-old wanted to go out, and she was free now. She wanted to party and go with her friends, and and it was fine. But we had money issues, and we still had certain sort of laws to live by. But also, my dad would phone, and he'd phone and say, "I saw your sister." With a skirt, and why do you let her stay over at her friends so much? And he would phone and he would say things like, "What have you done this to me?" Because we had done this to him. And he did try. He said he said once he phoned and he said my stepmom had cancer, and he said. And he was crying, and he was like, "How am I going to? I'm all on my own." This was him. "I'm all on my own, and I'm going to have to deal with this. And you need to come back, and I need support." And I said to him, "Bring a letter from the hospital to tell me that she's got cancer." Not that I would have probably considered going back, but and rightly so, it was a lie. And it still doesn't stop. So many years, and I was looking the other day, and I was thinking, between me and my sisters, we've got like my sister went to do her art degree, which wasn't right because art isn't for girls. So she went to do an art degree, she went to do a jewelry design degree. And my other sister went to do criminology degree, and then she's now a teacher. I went on to do medicine, and I go to work, and I do on a daily basis make decisions about people's lives, but when it comes to decisions about my own life, my own body, I still have to answer back to my dad, and my family, my extended family, which we weren't allowed to, by the way, at that point have contact with, because we weren't able to explain what had happened. We weren't able to explain that we weren't in contact with my dad. Also, we weren't able to be in touch with the Iranian community, because he would phone and say, oh, people are talking, people are saying you ran away, and I'm trying to set up this charity to help Iranian people, and I need to have, what about my reputation? And so we were terrified of meeting an Iranian people and having to say, and they would say, who's your dad and who's your mom, and having to explain. So we kind of completely stayed away from all that. So when I met women at IKWRO was 2 years ago, it was amazing, because suddenly I was meeting women from my own community who were saying, no, it's okay. What you did was okay. That was really important.